So our best mentors and coaches will always be those who've experienced our struggle and overcame it. As a leader, you want to be the person who understands the problems of your client, of your community, of your followers through doing. And then you get to be the version 5 or 6 that they want to become. So this wonderful way in which I have been leaning into my limitlessness this year allowed me to remind myself that this is always going to be a journey, and I get to share with you along the path. Being limitless is knowing your success and your growth are built on a radical belief in yourself. Limitless is honoring your purpose, your health, and impact above all else. Limitless is never playing small, because the more alive you feel in your life, the more growth and success you attract. Hi, my name is Jamie Ratermann, and I am a holistic business coach, meaning I am just as invested in growing your health as I am in growing your wealth. With 11 plus years in brand and social media marketing, I help rebellious entrepreneurs master marketing, embody leadership, and say fuck it to the hustle. This show is here to encourage you to become more radically aware of your self-imposed limits, to break free of your shoulds, and to expand your brand into a movement led by you. Hello, lovelies. Welcome to another episode, a really important episode of the Limitless Podcast. I'm so excited to get started today. I don't know if you've been feeling it, but I've been so thankful that I'm actually a part of an astrological membership, and I've been feeling this shift in energy. Like, I actually feel that New Year's energy has started this week. And I think, I'm not an expert, but I know it has something to do with the Virgo full moon. I know it has a lot to do with a lot of planets making a shift, all of the above. And it's just been feeling that March is kind of that time that the oomph, the gusto, the feelings are coming through for the year. And I think it's so helpful to sometimes have these memberships for the fact that it's called a cosmic circle. I'm going to give it a straight up shout out. And Sophia Adler is the entrepreneur who leads it. And within that, all of these other people, humans, entrepreneurs, corporate warriors, all of the above are sharing like, yeah, I've been feeling this energy too. So it's really fun to just be part of a collective talking about that thing. But I just want to say, as we talk about this episode, which I'm really excited to talk about, I am just feeling the vibes of what the year can be. And I'm excited by looking back at this last year, because that's exactly what it is. Today is officially 365 days of Limitless. Can you believe it's been a full year, 53 episodes, 9 minisodes, and all of that? I'm just getting started. I have to say it. I am celebrating that over a year ago, I took a risk that it felt absolutely challenging. I walked through self-doubt and worry about what others may think. I mean, starting a podcast found such like a crazy part of my entrepreneurship journey. It's something I wanted to do for so long, but those kind of limits had pushed me to wait for it. But I created this podcast because I know that I can share how I see life, business, and entrepreneurship. Like I can still remember the first time I played my very first episode, like listening to my intro, and it was on Spotify, it was on Apple. I was like jumping up and down on the bed. I was like, that's me. I kept like shouting it at my fiance Fred, and he just, Fred gets a full-time entertainment over here. Like, he gets to see how excited I am about my business, but also the man loves me because I'm a full-on nerd. I just remember taking this big move that felt so big then, and now a year later, how it's changed. So of course, there have been some revelations along the way. So within this episode, I'm sharing the ways in which I found my voice in the last year. And a part of that has a lot to do with the fact that when this episode comes out, it's International Women's Day. And as a woman, I want to empower other women to have voices, but this is a part of understanding what kind of woman you are and what kind of woman I became in the last year by using this amazing activation with this podcast, and for all of you who've been listening. So today's episode, I'm going to go ahead and share what lessons I've learned in the process, and I know that you can learn from too, the reality of what it really means to be running a podcast, and also what it has done for me as a leader. So buckle up. I promise to do a deep dive for you. So when I began Limitless, I had a new lesson in the who the fuck do I think I am complex. It's like to a whole new level. I have been a consumer of podcasts for years. The voracious learner, the person who is always researching, finding new information, that is me. That is who I am. So everything from armchair expert to School of Greatness to Dear Gabby, The Genius Life, Chillpreneur, just to name a few. I, in general, feel like I could probably have a whole separate business of doing podcast recommendations for most. So when I began my own podcast, I made a big mistake. I thought that I had to compete with these amazing voices who had been doing this for years, some for over a decade, and knowing exactly what and how I wanted to show up online. So I know this particular lesson is something that I may keep coming up against, but also too, it's something that I regularly am talking about in something like Marketing Mastery, where someone's like, well, I'm not as perfect as this person. I don't have my video figured out. I don't have my business perfectly coiffed like this other person. And I know that that can slow you down. So I can feel that. I can feel that for you as well. But I have big dreams, big goals, and a really big vision for where I would like to take Limitless. But this competitive limit or not enoughness that I had put on myself before starting was one of my biggest blocks. Essentially was the reason why I didn't start this 2 or 3 years ago. So thankfully, I shattered that in the process because I had a realization that I was applying so much pressure to how good my first episodes had to be or how great it all, like this big ship that I was about to set sail, instead of understanding that I get to build. So I came down to realizing that I am a human who has built a life worth sharing. And for me, I am also a coach whose purpose it is to show you that you are worthy of doing the same and make a living from it. So me pushing myself, getting through that limit allowed me to see that I wasn't living in purpose, but also understanding that stress and pressure really was what was pulling me back. But also too, I think there's a side of it with this who am I complex that we sometimes will get into, is that I just figured I wasn't the person to say it, or I wasn't the person to share it. And I decided, instead of feeling odd about sharing on a certain topic, I wanted to live by one main mantra. I trust that I am cool. I trust that I am cool and I have things that you might find cool that I share. So for my fellow quirky nerds, yes, you can do this. You can just declare that you're cool and decide to live by it. So this who am I complex was definitely something that was a big lesson for me, but allowed me to understand that we always get to relearn a lot of those same lessons as we decide to expand as humans. Within that too, Limitless, naming it Limitless, became such a large purpose for me. And what I want to really share about the idea of naming this podcast Limitless, it ended up being like a vision that was pulling me to where I wanted to go. So I think there's something to be said about when we push ourselves and always are challenging ourselves and saying we got to work hard, versus being able to understand where like what kind of vision we have that's going to pull us to be that person we want to become. So when I named this podcast Limitless, it was a download after a long meditation. So, naming in general is difficult. So whether it's a program or a product, whether it's a brand, whether it's a podcast, finding the name of something that like you're creating, that you literally bore yourself, can be so difficult. And even too with this particular podcast, there were many other podcasts that use the word limitless. So it's a very powerful word, but I was just kind of hell-bent, why Limitless was the name of the podcast that I wanted to create it. So if you want to go back to episode 1, if you want to go 365 it, take a look at the first episode. I share exactly why Limitless was such an important word and such an important name for me to name this podcast. But I did make a non-SEO strategic decision here to use this name that many people also liked. But I decided that my movement, the mission, the thing that in general motivates me each and every day was the most important part of this, and that I get to use the topics and the SEO to really understand how to build my SEO instead. So I find myself thinking more often than I ever have in the past year, asking myself this question: where am I putting limits on myself? So this is again me referencing the fact that I chose this project, this opportunity to really live more in my own limitlessness, that it was pulling me to think about it on a regular basis. And aside from what I want to share here is that sometimes the best way for us to heal, learn, and become who we want to be is to jump in with 2 feet, right? So I want to highlight this really more importantly here. There's this myth that we have to be the most perfect example without flaw of the things that we share. So somebody might share, a health plan, and they'll decide that, oh, well, I haven't been following it perfectly lately, or a meditation guide and I don't do it perfectly lately. The idea of this is that we share and teach as creators, coaches, and humans. We want to make sure that we can create the space that we understand the struggle as well as the strengths. So in reality, whenever you decide that you have to be this perfect example, you are creating such a space between you and the community that you serve. So it's kind of like creating this barrier, saying oh no, I'm a perfect example, you can be over there, or getting on a soapbox that somehow you're above your community, you're above your clients, whatever that might be, when in reality, you're equal. You've just maybe taken a few extra steps in them. You're still on the same path that they are. You just might be a mile ahead. So understanding that we don't want to try to act like we're perfect, one, because we can't connect with each other, but also two, I'm not limitless yet. Let's be real. Putting that kind of pressure on myself was not going to be worthwhile to me. So if it were true that I never struggled with the doubts and the blocks that I share with you that limit my growth, I would suck as a mentor, as a coach, as a podcast host. And Limitless is, made better by my strengths and my shortcomings, understanding that we get to share both. And for me, the reason why I want to share this is that Limitless, with such this big, powerful title, it has been this really big totem for me in a lot of ways. So Limitless created a lot of space for me to preach what I practice. And that is the right way to say it, not practice what you preach what you practice. So being able to show that I'm a part of this process just as much as you are. And it allowed me to get really vulnerable about the difficulty and, of course, triumph, but difficulty of what it is to be an entrepreneur for 6 years. So our best mentors and coaches will always be those who've experienced our struggle and overcame it. As a leader, you want to be the person who understands the problems of your client, of your community, of your followers through doing. And then you get to be the version 5 or 6 that they want to become. So this wonderful way in which I have been leaning into my limitlessness this year allowed me to remind myself that this is always going to be a journey, and I get to share with you along the path. Next within this is that I really found that I am a true creator. I love manifesting my ideas into this podcast. In general, within the first couple of episodes, I'm like, this is my favorite form of content. I said it really early, but also too, I realized that I got to hone this identity by trying something brand new, by going for it. So for many of the episodes, I help you think about how to personalize and create content strategy that people want to learn from. I'm always going to help you share those stories. But the same principle applied for me in this podcast, but my ability to share it was 3x'd. I was able to really create ideas off of things that I was passionate about, things that were happening in my coaching containers, but also just something that I was empowered to share with you all. And I think that that's one thing about podcasts that is different from social, is that I get to share as I am versus thinking about how to keep attention, how to work through all of these things when it comes to social, email, even just video and YouTube. Those have just those extra parameters. So the podcast allowed me to do that. So I've been a master ideator for brands and others alike for a very long time. So within that, I sometimes forget myself. I sometimes forget to be able to put that out myself. I'm getting better at it. Absolutely. There's not, I guarantee you can find a handful of social media managers that create so much content for someone else and sometimes will forget their own platforms themselves. But within that, I knew that I could help a lot of people. I rarely cannot come up with an idea for my sprinters, for my Thrive mastermind clients. Like I regularly will get a client to tell me to slow down or repeat it exactly as I said it. So that, that comes from 12 plus years of creating other people's stories in the making, but also understanding that like by doing this really crazy challenging thing, I'm owning this part of my process. It this is just reminding me specifically of it reminds me of when I decided what I wanted to do in college. So either like my dad, who was an insurance agent, when I was like, I'm going to be a journalism and major and a marketing minor, I was like, that's my choice in career. I remember him just kind of looking at me with like, can you make money from that? Is that something that you're going to want to do forever? And I more now than ever realize that my overflowing curiosity is still shining through. And thankfully that original choice keeps playing through. So the reason why I want to say this as a lesson is that it's really that I've been able to make it my own. I know what I'm about. And within that, this is just so many of the things that you and I have explored together. We've explored the changes in social media. We've talked about emotional mastery, that really hard thing to figure out. We talked about grief, leadership, video marketing, wealth, the nervous system, self-sabotage, brand building, offer suites, the role of control. So all of this has been a part of my entrepreneurship journey, and I've shared that with you just in case you didn't know that entrepreneurship and life is a wild, fulfilling ride. Just look at the ways in which I know that I'm serving you through all of those topics. And that's really what it is. In truth, I know that all of this serves you because deciding to lean in on your passions and turn them into a wealth generator for you is the most freeing, but also crazy ride because it's a lot of self-love, self-trust, and self-autonomy. But I had no doubt that I could serve my clients in this way, or I could serve my listeners like you. But sharing my life and lessons were what became so fulfilling. So sharing ends up being the way in which we love marketing our business. And for me, it was like, oh wait, my lessons are always worthy of being heard. My stories are always worthy of being heard. And of course, this podcast became my quick favorite. I believe that in general, if you've listened to every episode, you know me better than most of the people who are probably subscribed to me, just because I get to get into the deeper stories here. This last lesson of 365 days of Limitless is the one I wanted to leave you with. And because I want to be absolutely honest and true about what it means to have a podcast and use a podcast. Podcasts are a heavy lift without an immediate and direct return. So whenever I launched the podcast, I had a lot of people like, I want to do a podcast too. I want to do a podcast too. If you are considering starting a podcast, I'm going to tell you to do it. Enjoy it. It has been so fulfilling for me, but do it with a team. So as a business leader who runs numerous offers at one time with anywhere from 20 to 40 clients at a time, adding a podcast to my list was not a logical choice. Podcasts, at least at first, must come from passion to share and serve. The revenue, the direct sales, the visibility comes from a long-term resilience and showing up. And I can say that by having a team, it has been my ability to create this long-term resilience for this podcast. So this is where I say, I am so damn grateful for my team, Danny, who at this moment of this recording is on the other side of the camera, has absolutely held me through weeks where I was fatigued, down and out, kept me grounded because I definitely have big goals, and has given the same like oomph and energy into the growth that I want for Limitless as a part of my team. And I can sincerely say that more than any of my other projects, I have felt held in this process. And by really starting to trust this other person in my world, I wanted more of that in other areas of my business. So learning that is such a big part of it. Danny, I love you. But truth time here. Limitless has not made me any money directly. I'll let that sit there for just a second. So if you're considering and you think this is going to be a big money maker, it's unlikely to do that at first. However, it shines as one of my best indirect forms of communication with potential clients and conversion for that matter. In the past year, I would say around 70% of my high ticket clients, so this is my VIP one-on-one clients and my mastermind, even my marketing mastery clients in this current round, have absolutely referenced episodes of Limitless whenever they are making their decision to decide to work with me. So whether they are regular listeners or at the very least did a binge of a few episodes, this plays into that touch points and behavior data that I shared with you before, where people want to spend 7 hours plus with you before they decide that they trust you enough to give you their money. So the idea that I now have a place that, it's a one-sided conversation, but it's a conversation where you get to hear what I'm passionate about is something that I'm going to hold dear, but also know that the work that happens here helps in other ways, but it may not be direct, right? So we have some projects in the works of thinking about a more direct flow of wealth, and I'll be happy to share that as they come through. But coming back to the main point here, do not attach immediate sales if you are starting a podcast. And that goes for all of your marketing channels. It is a losing battle to create expectations for everything that you share. Marketing is a place to gain know, like, trust. That's the first thing that it is. Sales comes after, and easier sales come after, for that matter. So these are the places for people to trust you and allow you to be memorable when they are ready to buy. So try not to treat them any differently. Try to know that you want to be as detached as you can while showing up, and it's going to create long-term growth in the long run for you. These are just a few of the main lessons that I've learned and wanted to share with you after running this amazing podcast that I love so much for a year. I still cannot believe that it's been a full year since I said my first welcome to Limitless. But here's something I can ask from you. If you've listened to me at all in the past year, please finish this episode by leaving me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. It is one of the best gifts you can give me is knowing that you can cheer me on by sharing that, and so more people can find me. So until next week, live a little more limitless.